Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 5 Reasons You Shouldn't Back Dante's Inferno, which is now over on GameFound. Not to be confused with the ad up here that's for Inferno by Red Mojo Games. They did Tindaya a while ago. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about Dante Inferno by Creative Game Studios. They're the team that brought you, what was it called? Bargain Mold and Luchadors. No, sorry, Chronicles of Drunagor. I always screw up the name. I just always screw up the name. And they're now bringing you another hit which smashed its funding goal. Its goal was reached in 4 hours and 1 minute. No, I'm pretty sure it says on GameFound that it was funded in 1 minute, just 1 minute. That must be a little typo there. Goal reached in 1 minute and 9 seconds. This is over on GameFound just for another week, and the short time span might be making you feel like you desperately need to back. My buddy Colin, who's been on this channel, Colin Mustard, Colin Vongo as he will be referred to moving forward, he sent me a text the other day and said, listen, I'm back in another game. It's on GameFound. It's only going to be there for 10 days. You got to check it out. It looks really cool. Sure, they don't have a rule book on the page yet, but I don't care. The theme just looks so cool, and I'm excited. I said, that's great. I'm thrilled you're excited. And then it reached over $1 million, and now I am forced to tear his excitement down. If you're new to the channel, the premise of this series is that games are exciting, and sometimes we get swept up in that excitement without doing our due diligence. So this is a series of videos designed not to crap all over people's success, but to make sure that you are equally as excited when the game arrives at your door as you are right now when you hit that back button. This is a test of your excitement. This is a test to see if this game is actually right for you or if you've just been swept up in the very quick marketing of it. And I think that's important. I think it's important to reflect upon these sorts of things, really analyze our buying purchases. And lucky for you, you have me, the Divine Comedy, to put you on the right path. Now, this is sort of a unique one because I have more than 5 reasons. I have more than 5 reasons, and I'm going to come just front and center so you can focus on the words that I'm saying. I have more than 5 reasons here because I have some points that my patrons told me I wasn't allowed to say. And I think that's really just because they know I am shaming them directly and are afraid to confront their own buying habits. So we're going to get more than 5, but we'll just keep it in the same 5 reasons structure because, hey, we like structure around. And speaking of structure, before I go into the reasons and start being a mean, horrible person, as an avid gamer, I would be remiss to not talk to you about the things that are exciting about this game, the things that do sort of pique my interest. And I'll talk a little bit more of those as we go through the 5 reasons as well. There are some counterpoints to that, but there's a lot that's pretty cool about this game. The sculpts are pretty sweet. The theming is fun. It's based on the immortal work of Dante Alighieri, completely canon in Dante's story. And I also really like that it's coming in at that sort of $99 price. You see a lot of these big box games which are now $120 or $130. And so even though this one, like the base game, doesn't have any minis, I still like seeing that $99 price. You know, I like seeing that somewhat affordable. I mean, until you convert it into Canadian dollars and then add on the shipping. Wait a minute, this is the exciting portion. No, I really like seeing that. I think you're going to get a decent value from backing this, right? Like, it's not one of those things where it's a horrendous value at that base pledge or that the initial base pledge is fake, which you see a lot of. It's one of those games where I think, I think they're probably giving you as much as they can within their margins. It feels reasonable in that regard. Throw on $86 and you get a whole bunch of minis. That's kind of what Awakened Realms charges as well. They seem to be moving with somewhat of an industry standard, even if that industry standard is very expensive. The other things that I like specifically about the gameplay, I really like this aspect. They say dynamic turn with no downtime. Well, I still think there is going to be a bit of downtime. What they're expressing here is that there is this sort of free-form activation. In a lot of games, you just take a turn and then you have to wait while everybody else takes their turn. And not a lot of games give you this free-form structure where I can take an action, you can take an action, I take an action, you take an action. And that's really cool. It gives you the opportunity for a bunch of different combos that you wouldn't have access to in the generic sort of move, attack, move. Oh, now I'm completely done, so anything that you do can't affect me, right? It avoids that trap of talking out your turns too much as well, if you dislike that in a co-op game. So I think that's pretty cool. I like the amount of dice that you're going to be hucking. You're going to be chunking hunks of dunks, you know? And it seems like you're going to be chunking a lot of them. I wasn't sure if you would be chunking a lot of them, but the fact that they just give you 16 dice in the base set shows the amount that you can potentially roll. If you look at some playthroughs, which I have been obviously doing my due diligence, as an avid gamer, I must do my due diligence in order to advise you all through reading the rulebook and watching some playthroughs. There are cards that are like, add 5 dice to your pool and 6 dice to your pool, and that aspect of rolling a lot of dice is fun to me as well. So like the theming looks cool. I'm not a huge fan of the drab gray style of it, but I like some of the concepts that they are bringing forward here. However, this video, and I'm going to look you dead in the eyes so you know I'm serious, this video isn't about joy, it's about terror, it's about inferno, it's about lust and gluttony, specifically your gluttony, and avarice, specifically your avarice. I guess in this instance, avarice and gluttony are the same thing. And your wrath when I tell you you can't get yourself a little treat. Unfortunately, I am sorry to tell you that it's not Ciardi who's the way into the city of woe. It is me who is the way into the city of woe, as you woefully put down your credit cards and listen, at least for a little bit, to the 5 reasons why you shouldn't back Dante Inferno. And if I don't talk you out of it, well then hey, you passed the test. You made it through my 5 circles of hell. And go with the grace of all the undergods. But until then, listen up. Now, reason number 5 you shouldn't back might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but it is that you love the trailer and you love the theme. And that idea may seem counterintuitive. That idea may seem, well, no, if I love the theme and I love the trailer, like that's an obvious reason to back. Like this is a cool thing. This is getting me hyped up. But that to me indicates that if you're backing just based upon the trailer and just based upon the visuals and just based upon these minis, which are textured gray or textured in this stone texture, and it's not how they're actually gonna look, this is just a render. It's only a model. There are so many extraneous factors at play here, which I think we need to check before we can actually enter and engage into a real conversation about gameplay and mechanics and other factors. But for me, and this might be just because I've looked at a lot of Kickstarter trailers recently and board game campaign trailers, for me, this trailer that is still playing up above doesn't capture anything. It really looks like you're playing a Dark Souls video game, jumping from these pillars and doing flips and kicks, and that's the idea that it wants to evoke, and that's the feeling that it evokes. But I find with a lot of these things, you can get too swept up in the ideas and not actually engage with the gameplay itself. So that's kind of why I'm here. Maybe you'll think number 5 is a bit of a cheat. I'm not going to belabor it too much, but I think it is important to recognize, the thing that made me recognize it the most is the difference between these figures right here when you zoom out and you look at the minis versus all the minis that they show you here with this like textured stone. Obviously what they are going for, but as far as I've seen in the updates or in the add-ons, there's not really a way to, let's look at the all-in, right? They're not really showing you even the models. They're showing you the painted, the washed version, and there's no real way to get the wash in what they're advertising, right? Like this is just to call out the advertising for what it is, and it's advertising. And so while I think they're doing a lot right here on the campaign, I really do, I still think, I really feel like the imagery and the stuff that they're pushing forward is not as representative of the gameplay as other campaigns that I've seen. And that's not always a critique that I'll give, but it is one that I have particularly noticed here, especially with that texturizing of the minis, and especially with these sorts of component lists. Component lists are designed to make you feel like you're getting a lot, and they're not really ever representative of the actual gameplay experience. And so I also wanted to put this here for people who are new to the channel, who aren't used to having me spout similar points at them over and over, because I think it's really important to recognize what you're being marketed and what is actually going to be delivered upon. So let's get into that meat of the thing with our reason number 4, which is a question of how often do you play boss battlers? I think the boss battler genre is a very specific one, and it's one that me personally, I am not really that interested in. So for me, my FOMO on this is more of a tertiary look, a secondary look, an outside look, so to speak. I like the things that are happening. I think there's some neat little tweaks, but in its essence, it's still this boss battle. That's what its main focus is. That's what it is going to try to do really well. But if you're unfamiliar with the boss battler genre, you might be also unfamiliar with the repetitive nature of boss battle. There's only going to be 9 scenarios here, right? There's 9 different battles that you can face. There's 9 different gods, there's 9 different levels that you're going to work your way through. And there's going to be some other stuff in the additional pledges and whatever. So you can get 12 scenarios, the stretch goals, right? I think in the stretch goals there's going to be something else. Maybe not. Day 1, what is day 1 saying? Colosseum expansion and advanced limbo confrontation. Yeah, maybe not additional bosses, but I think at some point you'll get an additional secret boss, right? That's generally what they do. They'll save that for a big reveal or whatever. We can assume there's maybe 10. Let's just say there's 10 different scenarios. These are 10 different scenarios that you can play. And from my experience with Boss Battler, like I played Townsfolk Tussle, I played Monster Hunter World, a couple other ones. But with my experience, every boss sort of has a quirk, right? Every boss will have a set deck of actions that they can do. And these actions are going to cycle through, and these actions will be varied because of their action system, which I'll talk a little bit more about in number 2. But when I first started getting into the boss battler genre, I thought, wow, this is really cool. There's all these big bad monsters to face. This is neat. And going through it was exciting. And then the more I play the same boss battler, or even the more I play boss battlers in general, not even the same boss battler, the more these encounters all start to feel very samey to me. And that just might be a me thing. But I think you really need to be honest as to the level and how much you love the genre. Do you own any boss battlers right now? Have you played any? How often do you replay boss battlers that you own? Do you find the same issues that I do? Do you find that a lot of games start to feel similar with just minor tweaks to it? I find the boss battler genre to be very difficult to innovate in and to innovate well in. And so that's why I do really like that fluid movement, that fluid action. I think that really will add a lot to the feel of the game and the flow of the game. I think that's really quite interesting. But otherwise, I worry about the repetitive nature of these sorts of things. And if you're going to be shelling out like $400, you're going to go all in. You want everything curated. You want everything perfect. I think you would want to play it a little bit more than 9 times, right? And from what I have seen so far, and what I've seen that Creative Game Studios has been able to release with their demo box, I mean, in their demo box, they only have one monster, so obviously, in order to play it, everybody's just had to play it again and again. I'm not suggesting that there won't be variability, but I think that's also like a really interesting and relevant statistic too, is watching these people play these characters over and over, and hearing the various reviews on playing the same character over and over, and kind of picking up on the threads of how much people do want to engage with it again, or how much they're enjoying it if it's their first play versus their second play. I think those things are interesting to consider. Now, a lot of campaign games feel like one and dones to me as well, and this also feels in a similar nature. It doesn't have that going against it compared to like everything else, but it's also worth noting, right? It's worth noting that this genre of campaign or progressing through a story often lends itself to that lack of replayability, which some people may want. Me, I have too many games, so I probably wouldn't even get through one of the campaigns. However, hopefully you're not like me and you actually have time to enjoy and partake in your favorite hobby, and you can get through it and enjoy it for a long, long time. I just think, and this is the last thing I'll say so I don't keep belaboring the same point, for me, boss battlers have really waned, all of them in general, in my excitement. And I don't know if that's because I'm playing not that great ones, but I think I've been playing pretty good ones. I just feel like there's only so much you can do to make it not super repetitive. And even the changing of actions and changing how the monsters react, they still all will have general patterns, right? The map will always sort of be the same. The terrain, how you interact with the terrain and how you sort of cheese the game will feel similar. And I feel like whenever I repeat something, I end up falling into those same strategies because I know they worked in a general sense last time, and so it feels a little bit repetitive to continue to do it. So just be mindful of that. If you haven't played a lot of boss battlers and you're sort of an omni gamer and you've played a lot of different things and you like doing a lot of different things, the sameness of it all is a concern. And remembering and reminding myself of that sameness helps me not fall prey to how beautiful the minis look and how great this organizational system is already looking. Oh, give me some good organization, baby. I do love it. Let's move on to number 3. Number 3, I can go down to their gameplay section for this. Number 3 is that their Chronicle phase feels uninspired. Now, if I was bombastic, if I cared about shock and awe, I would say 50% of this game seems completely boring and unplayable after you've played it 2 or 3 times. And I'm not going to say that. Like, I think that's a dumb statement to say. As an avid gamer, I can never lead you astray. And there's a couple interesting things that happen in this Chronicle phase, but this is sort of being pushed forward as this endlessly different thing. It's your choices matter. Things will change in the boss battle, and your boss battle will be so significantly different because of this Chronicle phase, and I just don't believe that to be true. The Chronicle phase, in essence, will give you a way to get additional items, to get additional bonuses and boosts going into the boss battle, and also to potentially make the boss battle's deck a little bit harder. There's also a little note up here, well, where does it say? Yeah, you can play the quick combat version in which you can just skip the Chronicle phase entirely. And the fact that that exists, that you are able to skip this phase entirely, should show you how sort of unnecessary it is to the meat of the game and the heart of what this game stands for. Again, relating back to that boss battling aspect, it is the thing that is the highlight, right? That is the set piece. That is the thing that you need to want to engage with. And I think the Chronicle phase only emphasizes that. I think this will be a fun little thing if you like reading passages of story, but it's basically just a choose your own adventure game, right? You're going to explore the Dark Forest, and then you go one way or the other depending upon what characters you have, what you choose. You all go a different direction. You all meet different people. You read little passages of text, and then you try to achieve things with a little mini game. And the mini game itself seems really uninteresting to me. The mini game will basically be you'll draw these 5 Arcana cards. Let's see if there's a GIF of it up here. There isn't, so we have to zoom in. You'll draw these 5 Arcana cards, and each one will have a little number in the top. And then you draw 3 of these red cards and 3 of these blue cards. They're like Providence cards and Deliverance cards, or by their given names, Red and Blue, or Sword and Cup. You'll then have to combo these things together, adding them together or subtracting them together to get the number. So you see you have a red and a blue, a 5 and a 6, they add up together to get 11. You've cleared one of those Arcana cards. You've buried it. You've gotten rid of it. Whatever the difficulty is, if it's like a 1, 2, or 3, you have to make that many pairs. So you just draw a bunch of cards which have random numbers on them. You have 6 possibilities of combinations of cards that you can create, right? 3 plus 2 plus 1. That's how that math option works out. And then you see if you've done this thing. There are other things that you're going to be interacting with. There are choices that you can make, but it's all really about reading these passages of story text and then going on these little challenges. The thing that I find interesting, and what I think is the reason for doing this, these are going to be random, right? You might just luck into being able to create these things. Great, you did it. Congratulations. Was it skill? No, you added a 9 and a 6 together. Don't give yourself a pat on the back, right? Like that sort of system of like, hey, I'll add 2 numbers. You're just going to brute force it anyway to see if you can make the combinations. It's not like there's going to be that much of a challenge. And if there is, it's probably not a fun challenge because it just means that you don't really like doing mental math. even at that sort of smaller level of adding two numbers together or subtracting them, right? You're just going to brute force through the possibilities and say, hey, have I done it or can I not? Then you have an opportunity to spend tokens that you want to keep to have more advantages in the boss phase to reset the market, and maybe you'll randomly get something else. Or the better and more interesting thing is you choose one of these cards that you can't make work for yourself. You can't make work for the combination, aka this poet card, because I don't know what the numbers are in these cards, but there's only 8 of each. So I assume getting up to 22 would be very hard. This is the one that in the One Stop Co-op Shop playthrough, I think it was in there, I watched a couple, he decided to use to take, you take this and you put it into the boss's deck. So not only are you giving the boss this potential bad thing or this effect, but you know it will come up at some point. You're strengthening their deck, you're giving them more hit points because the size of their deck also represents their hit. And so I think that aspect of it seems fun because you're putting in these, again, these random cards and these little tweaks, right? And anything that helps tweak these things and shake up the game a little bit adds to that variability, adds to the potential replayability. I think the promise of that is very fun, but I think the journey of going through that will also get a little bit repetitive, or has the potential to get a little bit repetitive. I think the adding up the cards and this randomization just really doesn't appeal to me at all. I find it uninspired is the word I would use, and just not that fun, unfortunately. And so it'll all depend upon the choices that you get to do and how much you want to engage with the narrative text. And that is a fun thing. Like, I played through and really enjoyed this aspect of Monster Hunter World. You go through, you're tracking the monster, right? And you want to track it effectively so that it doesn't shuffle in cards to its deck. It's very, very similar. And that aspect is fun as you like are trying to collect gear and collect additional things. And I do enjoy it, but I also recognize its minimal importance and recognize that as you continue to do it, and especially if you're replaying the same scenario, right? Story is fun when you have that discovery, and when you don't have the discovery and you know what's going to happen and you're just choosing the optimal choice, well, you might as well pick the quick combat anyway, right? So this to me feels like a really one and done idea, and the activity of creating these things and adding these cards together just doesn't feel that fun. And while I don't think it is the prevalent feature, again, because it can be cut, if there's an aspect of the game where you're not actively excited about, like if you're really excited about this potential story, you've read through some of the story, you've watched the playthroughs to see that chronicle phase story and see the different choices that might happen, and you really want to be the artist who tames the panther only to stab it in the head and then wear it as a coat so that you get an extra ability or card, great, right? Like those are the sort of story elements that it's going to push you towards. It seems like it would drag on a little too much for my liking. The reason why I think I like it in Monster Hunter is because the passages are like really small, and I'm an idiot and I don't know how to read, right? So that's helpful for me, but I think like it keeps the pace quickened, and all of that pace and that non-downtime that you get in the boss battling phase, I think you're going to feel that in the Chronicles phase. And so that's just something to note from what I have witnessed. Let's move on to reason number 2. Oh yeah, this is something that I do like. I think this benefits solo if you find managing a lot of characters, because you use 4 characters each time. If you find managing a lot of characters to be troublesome, I do like you can make 3 of them like easy characters. You don't have to worry about their own individual decks. It gives you that flexibility to play with as much depth and control or as little as you want. I think that's a really cool thing. But reason number 2 is not about being cool. Reason number 2 is if you don't like death by 1,000 cuts. I think I've said this as a point in another game, but I wanted to flag it here because this kind of amplifies the feeling that I'm getting from the game. It's a little bit less so when you watch some playthroughs. It kind of got mitigated for me a bit as I watched through some of these different playthroughs, but I still think it's a bit there. And I imagine it will increase as the game goes on, because in the components list, you don't see like additional dice with like additional faces and things leveling up in that way. So I imagine how you level up is just by rolling more dice or getting more rerolls or something along those lines. But the base person to hit requires you to roll 4 hits. You have to roll every 4 hits you roll, you get to deal a thing of damage to that person. And I wanted to see a stack of the boss card, but I guess we'll go to the components list for it. Each boss sort of has 23 boss action cards. 25 seems to be the average. 25 plus boss action cards. So you have a stack of 25 cards, and a lot of these represent the boss's health. Now it's an interesting flow of the action phase where you're looking at a stack of cards and you see what the attack is going to be. And you don't know if you attack that card, it also acts as life points. So if you take that away, you don't know what new attack is going to be revealed. I think that's interesting. I think that each time you deal damage, if there's a counterattack, you kind of flip it over and it's going to have a different special thing on you. And the amount of cards there, I think, will create an okay amount of unpredictability. But I think each boss is still going to follow similar rules, right? It's like a pattern of a Dark Souls video game. You learn the pattern of the boss and you know when to dodge and you know how to absorb the hits. That's what I've found in pretty much any boss battling game I've played, and that solving that puzzle is interesting until solving that puzzle isn't interesting. But it gives a sensation of it being a death by 1,000 cuts and just kind of waiting out your enemy. Because when the boss does the attack, they lose the card, right? When you deal damage to them, they lose cards. When they get the counterattack, they lose cards. And so you're just trying to whittle down this deck as much as possible. And while I think that allows you to have more action cards than a standard boss battler, which I think is a good thing and potentially keeps that replayability alive, I still find personally that flow of just whittling things down and rolling a ton of dice only to deal 1 damage or 2 damage. It's the same way when I played Monster Hunter World, there were some monsters that had a ton of armor on them, right? And you have to have enough damage to get past the armor to even deal 1 hit. And so you're just dealing like 1 at a time, 1 at a time, and 1 at a time, and whittling down this huge stack of health. Again, for me, that builds into that tedious nature. I would prefer more of that instant feedback, right? That haptic feedback, that dopamine hit of, I killed this guy and I killed this guy and now more things are spawning, right? Like I like that a lot more in my games, and that's just a style thing. But I think it's worth isolating the feelings that you will feel throughout the game, right? And if you don't like that clawing nature, that clawing for every point, you don't like this boss that's just running around hitting you over the head with pillars over and over and over again, and you're just trying to stay alive. You're like, oh, I take a wound, but at least they got rid of that card. Okay, I take another wound, at least they got rid of that card. And you're constantly both soaking up damage and trying to deal your own piddly amount of damage, and then it feels like you can't even do as much damage as the boss is dealing to themselves, right? I can see that flow and that feeling. For me, it doesn't excite me. Maybe that really excites you. And I think if that really excites you, like that should be the reason to pull the trigger, really. Again, I want to make sure that you are happy and excited and like pumped to get this game out and get to the table. And if that's the type of experience, that like clawing and scratching for every inch of progress on the battlefield, and then chucking hucks of dice and sometimes being able to do a lot of damage and sometimes like doing nothing at all and just getting beaten down and having to struggle up, like that does sound fun in a sense. But I also know a lot of people will be taken in by the theme and not recognize that like that's the flow. There's one big mini for each one of these things, right? Each pack, each scenario gives you a standee, gives you a boss card, which tells you the stuff. Okay, who cares? It gives you location cards so you can go on your journey. That might be interesting once, and then never it be interesting again. Gives you treasure cards, which will upgrade you throughout the game, either at the end or in that storytelling phase. And then it gives you boss action card, right? Like this is what you're getting 9 times over. You're getting a stack of boss action cards and a cool looking standee. Or if you shelled out, an extra $86, you're getting a cool looking mini. That doesn't look like this. It looks a lot more gray, right? But you're doing that every time. Just looking at the actions here, looking at the breakdown of all these things, the thing that draws us in is the cool looking mini, right? The thing that draws us in is the promise of these minis to be as different in feel as they are in sculpt. You see, okay, now this one requires 5 hits to deal damage. This one requires 7 hits to kill, right? This person requires 9 hits on your dice in order to get 1 card away from them. You can see violence requires 7. You can see all of these characters, all of these new things, all of these villains will escalate probably in difficulty and probably in tactics, but more likely will escalate in time. The amount of time you just need to survive. And if you don't like that idea of just surviving and waiting out the boss, if you want those sort of more epic moments, even though you're chucking all these dice, if you chuck 16 dice and you have to hit 9, if you got 2 hits on every single dice of those 16, that would be 32. So you would deal 3 damage if you had to roll 9 successes per hit. That's it. If you had a magical perfect roll of 16 dice, you get to deal 3 damage and take 3 cards out of this 25 card stack, right? That's how I envision some of these battles playing out. And if you go in with different expectations, I think you might be disappointed. If you go in with that expectation and you're excited for it, that's fantastic. Now, reason number 1, there's a lot of reasons in here, but I'm going to lead with one that I found to be really prevalent on the campaign. And I love that there's a rulebook here. I love that they're giving everybody access to what people have been playing in the demo. I love that they're saying that things are upgrading. But reason number 1 is that you don't know what you're getting. 1A, because I got more. Now, again, this is sort of a bombastic statement that you could really take to the extreme. And I'm not really that interested in taking it to the extreme, right? You could make a whole bunch of parallels with any other companies out there who haven't delivered, blah, blah, blah. No, it doesn't matter. Creative Game Studios, they've delivered on Chronicles of Drunagor. People have been loving it. They did the second printing of Chronicles of Drunagor, Age of Apocalypse, and I think people have gotten it. Let's check that. Update, fulfillment update. Look at that. Getting to backers' homes. It's almost to backers' homes in Canada, and that was at the 10th of January, so probably pretty good. Although they said that we share your dissatisfaction. So when was it estimated? I mean, this estimate, the estimate on campaigns are always wrong. Like, let's be clear, if you're new to pledging on campaigns, they're always wrong. Shipping for the Apocalypse Adventures in December 2022, and it's almost being fulfilled in January 2024. So a year late. Yeah, that's fine. But it's being fulfilled. They're getting it there. They haven't run away with your money, whatever, right? Let's go back to Dawn. So that's not the take that I'm wanting to get there. However, in most campaigns, you see this all the time in reviews, whatever, they say, listen, everything is subject to change, like rules and images, they're all subject to change. I've never seen it mentioned so many times. maybe it's just something that I haven't noticed and I'm noticing it right now, but I don't think I've seen it mentioned so many times as I have right now. And that's also a good thing. Like, I remember looking at the comments of, I forget whose video, maybe Alex's from Board Game Co., where Creative Game Studios said, thanks, you know what, we've changed the Chronicles phase, because I think he had a similar feeling to me. Yeah, thank you for the honest feedback. As for the Chronicle phase, we've changed a lot since the prototype. And also in the confrontation, we have our ears opening to listening to feedbacks, right? So I think that's great. I also think that's kind of like a standard thing that you're going to say when you want people to buy your game. But I also think it's worth driving home, and this is going to lead me into my other points, 1B and 1C and point 0, whatever you want to call them. I also think it's worth driving home that if there are things that are flagged and that feel like they need to be changed, I think it's great for change to happen. But I also think that, especially with like such a short campaign window, not especially, even with any campaign window, it's so short that you don't have the development time to test these things out, right? You're sort of backing on faith. You're backing on faith of the company. You're backing that the company can deliver and can make the changes needed in development to make it a more interesting game. And so I've encountered this in a lot of instances, especially with games that I've backed, that they have changed and they've become different games. And if you don't have faith in the studio and you don't have faith in the designers, or these changes may not be for the better. These changes may be different than the game that you want to arrive at your door. This happened for Ankh for me. I backed Ankh and I backed it reading the rule book. And I remember thinking, oh, those rules look like really cool. And then obviously there were balance issues and the rules changed specifically around the merge mechanic. And I think it made it less exciting for me. And I remember feeling bummed out that the thing that I was hoping for didn't arrive. And obviously it had to change. Like the thing that I was hoping for maybe was unbalanced and wouldn't have worked and wasn't working in theory. But it's just sometimes important to recognize and important to flag that these things happen. And so some people might take that as an opportunity to say, well, that's why I don't do any research on the game. Then I can't be disappointed. To you, I say, no, you shouldn't be backing this game because you haven't done your research on it. There are playthroughs. There is a rule book there now. If you haven't read those things, if you haven't investigated them fully, you don't really know, other than taking the faith and the good word of a studio, how this game will turn out. And you can take that. If you've played Chronicles of Drunagor and you love it, and you have faith in that studio. Like I really like Command games, and I had faith in Command that they wouldn't, I know, a weird sentence to say, some people might be saying, to have faith in Command, but like I had faith that they wouldn't screw it up. And they changed Trudvang as well. Like they completely changed how that game played as well, and that increased delays and etc. Like this is all part of the process. This is all part of buying in advance. And so that's why you really want to be excited about the aspects of it and the things that are different from existing games. That's 1B, is that other options already exist. I was looking up how much Oathsworn would be to get to Canada, for example, because I live in Canada. That's how I can navigate things. If I was getting the lowest tier here, the Explorer tier, right, with the standees, the 9 scenarios of standees, I think Oathsworn has 27 scenarios. This would cost me $138, right? $138 to Canada, cost me $190, $186 to get it shipped to my door. Approximately, we take the highest shipping value that's estimated, it'll probably cost about this much. I could also buy Oathsworn for $255 Canadian with shipping included. You can just trust me on those numbers, or I can show you them. I could also buy Monster Hunter World for $130, which has that little narrative element at the beginning where you get items, you have character progression as you go through. You don't really have a story, you have less narrative story. But if you want less narrative story, right, I picked Oathsworn as the other example because it has a much larger narrative story. You're spending a long time with that narration, it's almost half and half of boss battling and like choose your own adventure story. And so you really want to like that in that aspect. If you don't like it that much, you can go for Monster Hunter World, which just has like snippets, and then you get into the thing. In this case, you could cut it entirely as well and not worry about it, because it has that really minimal implication. But you get that for $130. I think there are other games out there that do a similar thing, and I'm not sure if the free action and the freeform action is enough. I like that they're just resting it on her as though he's been picking it up. I'm not sure that they do enough, or it is currently doing enough to stand out amongst the crowd and to warrant waiting for 2 years to play something when you could just get something that exists right now and play it. And if you don't have the urge to get something that exists right now, not that I'm trying to push you into buying anything as well, but I just want to flag this as a mindset thing that happens a lot on Kickstarter and GameFound in these campaigns. If I don't have reason enough to buy a game that is very similar to the game that I'm considering right now, like to go out to my store and pick it up and bring it home and do that right now, it's probably not a good back. I'm probably backing it for the dopamine hit. I'm probably backing it to add to the collection. I'm probably backing it for future hope that I can get through my backlog of games, and not actually backing it for the gameplay because I want to play it, because I want to engage in this thing. And so I think that's also a really good test of what would stop me from going out and buying a similar thing, right? And then finally is like 1C, or reason number 0. And yes, I'm throwing it in here. This is one of the reasons why you may not go out and purchase something, is because you have too many outstanding campaigns already. Too many campaign games. You might have too many campaign games at home that you are not playing, but I don't think this is necessarily that much of a campaign game. I'm saying you have too many outstanding campaigns. If you have 100, or even if you have 80, or even if you have 15, right? There's a tendency to get into this hobby and to purchase and to purchase and to purchase and to purchase and to forget about what is coming down the line. If that isn't you, congratulations. Run as far as you can away from board game YouTube, because you're going to go down a rabbit hole and you're going to want everything. And it is fun to want everything. It is joyful to want everything. It can also get away from you very, very easily. And so I want to make sure that that doesn't happen. I want to make sure that you have the space on your shelves. I want to make sure that you're not drowning in boxes, that you don't have to hide things from your spouse, that you have the room in your house, and that you have the time to play all the things that you have mentally committed to. My backing has taken a severe decline since I backed a whole bunch of stuff in 2020, and then they all started arriving at the same time. And I thought, oh man, I just really wanted to play a game that day. I just wanted to play something that day, and I now have 10 boxes of things that I don't have the time to play, and I don't even know if I really want anymore, right? I want to avoid that sensation. And so if you have too many campaign games that you're not playing, if you have too many boss battlers that are the same, if you aren't feeling like you would go out and purchase something similar, or at least try it out at this moment in time, because you've played maybe all boss battlers in existence and every campaign game in existence. This is the only one you got left, so you gotta have it come in, you know? I think that started off as a negative, but it ended as a positive. I don't know. But those are the sorts of things to flag and to consider, and just, that's what I'm here for, to be devil's advocate. But if you made it through the 5, 6, 7 circles of room and board hell, and you're still excited to get Dante's Inferno, Colin, well, I hope you enjoy playing it. I hope it's everything that you hope for and more. So to all the Collins out there, you made it through. Good job. Go run off and purchase it right now at your store. Oh, you don't have the room? You don't feel like it? There's a reason for that, right? There is a reason. Anyway, drop your comments down below what you think about the game. What are your reasons to back or to not back? I think both are equally important. I love having these videos as a way to assemble all of that feedback, and maybe sometimes tip me over the edge into backing. I think I'm fairly safe right now, especially because I know Colin might be getting it. Maybe he won't after this video. We'll have to see how convincing I am. But I'd have access to it. Again, it just doesn't really turn my crank. I've realized that boss battlers don't turn my crank that much, and there's no reason to spend $100 on a game that, in a genre that you only think is kind of okay. So what makes this one stand out amongst all boss battlers? That's what I'm really curious, because I feel like that would be a 5 reasons to back, if you can come up. Anyway, thanks for watching. My name is Chris George. I don't know a catchphrase, and I don't know how to stop talking. Please get out of here. I'm gonna keep going, and I'd like to stop.